I have the distinct pleasure of introducing today's discussion. First, I want to introduce to my right, we have Adam Groh. He's the Chief Operations Officer at Core. Thank you, Adam, for being here. To his right, Craig Reiner, Senior Vice President, Strategic Marketing and Chief Marketing Officer at Highmark Health. Thank you, Craig. Katrina Polanka, did I pronounce that right? She's Vice President, Global Partnerships at Spurs Sports and Entertainment. To her right, Katie Keating, Senior Vice President, Brand and Consumer Marketing at Frost Bank. And last but not least, Ryan Bashara, Executive Vice President, Revenue and Strategy at Los Angeles Football Club. Thank you all for joining us. The discussion today, Mastering the Game, Leveraging Data to Drive Marquee Partnership Deals. I will hand the mic back in a second. I was on the main stage earlier today, and the panelist had a great line. She said, data is marketers' love language, and I just love that. And so I always love talking about data. I always love hearing about data, so thank you all for joining us. Thank you.
Core is the global leader in partnership management and measurement. We help over 900 brands, teams, clubs, leagues, as you can see here across our panelists, measure and manage their sponsorship portfolios. Really, we're the only solution in the industry that can manage the end-to-end process, which we're going to talk about today with some of our esteemed partners here. Thank you all for joining us. We have a great panel here with great speakers. Thank you guys for taking the time out to join us. And we're going to kick things off here talking about venue naming rights. You'll recognize all the logos up here, outside the Core logo, of course, which we do all the back-end work, right? All four of those logos you'll see tied to some of the biggest naming rights deals that have been done in the past 12 to 18 months. And these naming rights deals continue to become more and more marquee assets in these partnerships that are happening in sports and entertainment. And so what we really want to do is dive into the tools and metrics and measurements that are coming out of that are actually driving these deals. So to set the stage here, what we really want to do is start with kind of the beginning, setting the stage process. What does it look like? Or what are you looking for, either as a property or a brand, or a property and brand together, to actually start driving and measuring partnerships? So maybe Ryan, starting with you, you could talk a little bit about you're out there hunting, you're out there looking for partners for naming rights deals. How does it all start? What are the metrics you're looking at? How are you actually looking at targets and so forth?
Yeah, definitely. So the biggest things that we look for, and it's not an exact science because there's a lot of heart that goes into it actually. Some of it is really tied to values, but when we're looking at it from a data perspective, it's about industry, and we have a lot of different tools that we use, as well as the different levels of spend that are potential, right? So when you look at a potential company, you see what is their growth like from a revenue perspective or their funding. And then as well, is there an alignment with the product or service that they actually offer? So can we as a club or a stadium use that service? Can our fans use that service? And is there a story there that is authentic and genuine? Because if you have those components, that's really the real success of the partnership, is when that marriage truly exists. The other KPIs like the revenue and the growth and all those things just ensure that the math will work at the end of the equation for the deal, and to help us fund our stadium, our property, our players, the staff, all that goes into it. But ultimately it's about searching for brands that are sometimes new and entering into sports, and then others that are very savvy and sophisticated and have done it before, because on either end of that spectrum you can have quite a variety.
So switching it over here to Craig, you guys had not had done naming rights deal before until recently. You had done some partnership deals, but how did the bill specifically come to you and actually start intriguing you about the idea of thinking about a naming rights partner?
That's a great question, Adam. It's interesting. As a regional brand, not a national brand, we are an affiliate of the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association of America, but we have geography and trading areas, and oftentimes a naming rights deal tends to be more of a national play where you're trying to get national exposure with a professional sports team. that doesn't matter as much to us. We can't sell our products outside of certain footprints. So we don't take naming rights deals lightly. But it just so happened that post-pandemic, the Bills had a naming rights sponsor that had defaulted on their naming rights deal, New Era. It used to be New Era Field for those that remember. And it was right at the time that we were acquiring the Buffalo-based Western New York Blue Cross Blue Shield plan. So for those of you that aren't as familiar with the northeastern geography, Pittsburgh and Buffalo are only about 3.5 hours apart from each other, and we're headquartered in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. But the Highmark brand in Western New York meant nothing. So we had, it was less than 9% unaided awareness, even though we were only 3.5 hours away. So when we entertained the idea, there was an opening. We were a new brand in the marketplace. What better way to establish ourselves as a local brand than to attach ourselves to the biggest fan base of that particular marketplace, which was the Buffalo Bills. And it was actually born out of a good opportune moment for the two brands, but it was also born out of a relationship. We had actually been covering and doing all the insurance for Terry Pagula, the owner of the Bills. He and his private businesses, his oil and gas well business where he made all his money, we were insuring all of his employees. So we knew the family, they knew of us. They wanted someone local. We wanted to create a true partnership, and it really worked out well.
And you mentioned the 9% awareness in the marketplace. Was that a metric you had kind of going into talking to the Bills, and you said this is a great way to kind of create awareness, and then how are you, we'll actually get to that in a minute,
Sure.
How you're actually going to measure against that. So kind of pivoting now, we actually have two partners. The most recent deal up here that's been announced in the Spurs Sports and Entertainment and the Frost Bank Stadium deal. Maybe you two could kind of bridge the gap here, because we got Ryan over here, we got Craig over here. Can you guys kind of talk about your story and how it came together, and the kind of metrics that you guys were talking about to kind of drive the negotiations?
Sure, I can start, and then you feel free to add color. Frost has been a partner of the Spurs for more than 50 years. Our paper trails only go back 50 years, and we could not figure out if it was longer than that. But the family, the Frost family, played a big role in bringing the Spurs to San Antonio from Dallas. And that's how far the history tracks. Now, the unique challenge there is that Katie and her team were not going to be impressed by seeing the logo that you see on the screen. Because when you've been a partner for that long, that shine that most inaugural partners are going to get excited about did not have an effect on their team. And so what we needed to do was create a solution that was going to solve for a business need. And we had the benefit of knowing what those were, having been a partner for such a long time. And we built something really special about financial belonging.
Yeah, so I can add some color to that. Not only have we been partners with the Spurs for 50 years, we have done a lot of firsts together. So I believe Frost sponsored the first Jumbotron in the NBA for the Spurs way back when. We were the first jersey patch partner for the Spurs. And now naming rights were sort of a natural extension of our relationship. And I love what Ryan said about how values are really important as you think about these investments that you make. Now, we know the Spurs really well, having been partners for 50 years, but as you think about what's ahead, and for us, Frost is expanding. We're a Texas-based bank. We're headquartered in San Antonio, but expanding tremendously throughout the state. And so for us, as we thought about raising awareness in some markets where maybe we don't have the level of awareness we have in San Antonio, how can we build on our values, our integrity, caring, and excellence? The Spurs are integrity, caring, and success. And so we're just so well matched as a team. And Katrina mentioned financial belonging. Our brand at Frost is really all about bringing relationships and humanity to banking and empathy. And so financial belonging was we sort of coined a term for what we feel like we've always done. We've always sort of treated people the same, whether you have, $5,000 in your account or $500,000 in your account. We want anyone and everyone to feel like they belong and that the banker that they do business with knows their name. And the Spurs sharing those values and really appreciating the platform that we had created around financial belonging came to us with some really unique opportunities to tell that story through the lens of our partnership. that just felt like a perfect way to grow our awareness and also capitalize on what's so important to us as a brand.
So we hear a lot about values and aligning with the marketplace. Ryan, the BMO deal, that's kind of an interesting one, right? Because BMO is based in Canada and so forth. So when you actually started engaging with them, what were the pieces that actually made them say, LA makes a lot of sense to us, or were they already coming after it? And what were those metrics that you kind of had to work with them on to sell them, I think, what is the largest naming rights deal in MLS history, right?
That's right.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so we're very fortunate because in finding each other, there was a perfect marriage of a lot of strategic objectives along with data fluency, and that's really hard to find, as well as someone that had already done stadium naming rights before, understood how it worked, how to leverage it, how to maximize it, and was already super invested in football and specifically in Major League Soccer. So that was really perfect. It was almost like, frankly, they pitched us just as much as we pitched them. I remember very vividly the first real formal meeting we had. It was really cool because they brought a whole presentation just like we did. We traded presentations, and at the end of it, it was, here's why we're your perfect partner. And it was just very special to have that kind of synergy because as they were growing into the market from, like you said, Canadian and Northeast, mainly bank, to acquiring all the Bank of the Wests in California and really being able to expand that presence on the West Coast. It was really a perfect marriage because we were the last stadium naming rights opportunity that would be available for the next decade. So it was that, or they wouldn't have it, and it was perfect timing as well because just the last month they've now converted all of the Bank of the West customers to BMO customers. So this year was really integral, and the timing of the availability of our stadium and the ethos that we both had from a data perspective, which was critical. Like if we hadn't been able to speak to, here's the reach and exposure you're going to receive, here's the survey data that we provide you, that's standard for every partner gets it. It's not just because you're stadium naming rights. Like, this is our process, and we're going to take your specific objectives, which to start a partnership like this, for them in this case, very much an awareness play to start, but then goes towards sentiment and consideration very quickly from there. So this first year, really strong in that regard, and then next year we'll be starting the process of consideration and conversion in a more meaningful way, but really the ethos of being boldly a force for good together, which is shared in both of our values, was the anchor to the entire mutual presentations that we did. And so that tied to the community and how we want to empower small businesses and tell their stories, just as much as we're telling the story about community members that are doing good as well, was really critical, and also for the game of soccer and growing it as well and access to it in our markets. So the combo of all those things, it was just checked every box for everybody. Very rare, but when you find it, it's great.
Yeah, you said something interesting because you're going into year 2 of the deal,
Yeah.
right? And what we see a lot when we're working with our partners on partnership measurement and valuation and stuff is it's not like 10 years of the same stuff, right? Like, brands grow, teams grow, fan bases change, objectives change. So you're already saying in year 2, like, the objectives are actually shifting for you and BMO. Like, Craig, maybe you could talk about a little bit about the Highmark deal, and you guys are going in not only to another year with them, but potentially a new stadium.
Yeah.
How does that work, going from an old kind of legacy stadium to potentially a new stadium, and how is that going to shift your objectives, especially now as that market awareness of 9% is going up? Then what? What changes? How do you think about those types of things?
That's a great question. We think a lot about a lot of components. I mean, so again, I think I mentioned at the top, we're a nonprofit healthcare company. So every dollar we spend in marketing contributes to administrative costs, which goes into everybody's PMPM, or per member per month fees. And nobody likes to pay more for healthcare. I don't think anybody here in this room would agree with or disagree with that. So we have to really think about every dollar we spend and how it works for the business, and we're highly regulated. We're a lot of government clients, so they look at that as well. And a naming rights deal is usually long-term, big dollars. So a lot of that has to go into the equation. When we first entered into the deal, it was for an aging stadium. We knew that we got a great deal because of the default of the prior sponsor. It was perfect for us for our new brand introduction to the marketplace, and it was an awareness play. Proud to say that in just 2 short years, we are now at parity with unaided brand awareness in Western New York as we are with our legacy markets, which is phenomenal growth. Could not have done it without that particular stadium deal. We measure on a quarterly basis. We look at that. But now we are much like Ryan talked about, we are moving now from the awareness to the consideration and preference funnel standpoint. So we measure Gen Pop awareness, preference, consideration, and then we also do an overlay against fans who are self-reported fans of these teams that we sponsor, and we see lift. And that's actually written into a lot of our performance contracts. And when you go with the naming rights, there's a lot that goes into, okay, how are we going to annually review performance between the team and the sponsor, and how are we going to reconcile on an annualized basis based on that performance, and how do we tweak the model and the mix? And so it's awareness, it's consideration, it's preference, it's impressions, it's actually affinity. Yep. And so we do a lot with the season ticket holders and the subscribers for these professional teams, especially the Bills. You have a lot of retired people. We sell Medicare Advantage insurance products. If our relationship with the Bills can get them to consider purchasing our insurance product, we win. And we've seen that. So we actually track membership growth as well.
Yeah, and we work with a major telecom company, and we actually help them bring in, they have over 35 plus pro sponsorships. And when we first started working with them, it was just about understanding the assets that were actually being utilized. Once you kind of get to that format, it's a little bit more around what are our measurements, and then after that, it's the objectives. And now once you get to that level of clarity, we're seeing objectives changing, not only on a year-by-year basis, but actually even a seasonal basis, especially as you're introducing campaigns and these things that one's driving awareness, others driving conversion. How do you guys see that in your deals from a brand perspective, your deal together? And I know it's still early on, but you still have the 50 years of history and your deal with BMO.
What you guys got?
For us, we really looked at financial belonging as a big opportunity. I mean, I think we've all heard of financial wellness and financial education, but what financial belonging does is, and Frost has done something really innovative here. They've acknowledged that maybe a portion of that burden is on your banking institution to help you feel comfortable about asking the question, to even start to try to ask about a 401k if you don't understand what that is. And when we started this process, we looked at how many Google search results there were for financial belonging. The number is 1,080. Compare that to financial wellness had somewhere in the 7 millions, financial education had somewhere in the 11 millions. No one knows what financial belonging is. And we use that as the anchor point to start to build out what a campaign could look like. Our next step is to build benchmarks, which a lot of properties and partners on both sides are scared to do. Because if you put a benchmark on that at the beginning of your partnership, you could fail. But that's the point. The point is to give yourself some kind of a flag so that you can know whether you're succeeding or failing. Even if that flag is something that maybe I'll never tell Katie or you'll never tell me because we're sitting on opposite sides of the table, but it gives you something to strive for, and you can start to measure your first couple of campaigns against those benchmarks. And when you have a partner like Frost, 77% of Spurs fans can recognize Frost on more than 4 assets in the partnership. The NBA average is 40%, so they're well above it. And our unique challenge being partners for so long is creating benchmarks that actually drive retention and acquisition. And where we are in the process right now is starting with, we know that the naming rights deal will bring in 10.6 billion impressions for Frost. Can you convert 1% of them to engage? Can you convert 0.05% of them to consider an account? Can you convince 0.02% of that to then upsell them on the next product? That is our next level of measurement in the process of our partnership.
Yeah, and I think, but that's a really important point, right? Is the ability to have more near-time conversations. And across our portfolio, we still see that hesitancy. And they're afraid, like, if you're not hitting it, it's going to blow up the whole partnership. So what do you do when the Spurs aren't delivering?
Well, thankfully, they're amazing partners, and we have, there's a lot of trust between our two organizations, having the history that we do. And San Antonio is a unique place. You know, we are the 7th largest city in the US, but it really feels like a small town. And one of the things, like one of the interesting pieces of context about San Antonio is, the Spurs are the team in San Antonio, and Frost is the bank in San Antonio. And so, as we wanted to really not only build our brand through the lens of financial belonging, but just it's important to us that people feel empowered in their relationships. We're going to feel our way through this together, and certainly there's a business angle. There's message pull through that we want to see, but because we have such an amazing handle on that market, it's a perfect jumping off point where we already have the awareness and engagement and recognition to then go deeper and say, well, there's some storytelling that we want to do here, and having the platform of the Spurs alongside us is going to be an amazing boost for that.
Well, we're getting close to time here, but I do think, given all of your experiences and your knowledge, if you're kind of speaking to the people out in the room here, whether they're rights holders or brands, just from your position, what are the two pieces of advice you give as they consider going down, maybe not a naming rights deal, but more of a marquee type asset level platform partnership? What would you say to them as they get ready to go?
I can start. So the main things that I would advise a property first are to be very clear about what you want the measurement process to be with the brands that you're working with, because ultimately your ability to keep proactively engaging with the client once they become a client on their objectives and really pushing for their objectives constantly and also how they're changing every single year of the deal is really critical to the long-term success, so that they want to renew and grow, as Frost has in this example, which is a perfect example of that. And then from the brand side, I would just say have a clear vision of what exactly you want to achieve with the partnership. It's easy to say high level, but it comes down to some of the metrics like we just discussed today in terms of understanding what does success look like holistically from a sentiment perspective with affinity of fans and customers, whether it's B2B or B2C. What do you want to see from a growth of audience perspective, and also what specific words, themes, phrases, much like we mentioned earlier, whether it's being a force for good or it's for financial belonging. What are those things that you want to associate in the mind of the consumer? Because ultimately that's what you're driving towards. And without those North Stars, you're just doing branding. And that's you can buy that in different ways that is much less connected to people and hearts and minds.
Wow, everything that Ryan said. I also think, with these big investments in long-term partnerships, the company you keep is really important for your brand. And so I think the values alignment and making sure that, when there are challenges, and inevitably there will be, that you feel good and comfortable and confident as a brand that you'll be able to work through those together. So the relationship is really, really important.
I'd say don't underestimate the lift that it takes and the resources that it takes to launch a deal of this size. I mean, to start, you're probably at 3 people working on this full time, so 120 hours for the first 8 weeks, and then you can maybe scale down to 40 hours a week. You divide that by 2 people doing it half the time or 1 person doing it full time. But a deal of this size and scale, you need at least half of someone's time thinking fully about how to activate it, because the thing that is unnamed is the opportunity to activate the IP, and that burden falls on the brand for the most part. The property can only help you so much, and they can provide advice and they could provide you with the channels and the means to do it, but the lift, a lot of it falls on Katie and her team to think creatively about how to maximize and squeeze out every dollar that they're spending out of this partnership. And that requires getting creative. We've talked about branding a ton on this panel, but brands that are able to use partnerships of this size and scale to recruit, to engage their employees, that requires someone on Katie's team to go department by department to figure out, like, this is our deal, this is what we're trying to do. Is there a way for your department to utilize this? Because they're already spending the money. Like, they can use this all they want. It just requires time and effort for someone to go and proactively figure that out.
Yeah, those are all great points. I think I would just add just a couple other thoughts. I couldn't agree more on clarity. Like, as a brand, what exactly is your objective in this partnership? Because it's not a brand buy, it's not a media buy. Media buys you can cancel if they're not working. You enter a long-term naming rights deal or a significant sponsorship deal, you're in it for a while. So be clear on what you're trying to achieve. Make sure you've got objective measurements to it. The second piece is you have to activate. Absolutely. You don't want to put your brand on a building and assume that you're going to get your value out of it. You have to be able to bring it to life somehow in a meaningful way that resonates with your business and your partner's business. The third is really truly think about it as a partnership. And what are all those adjacent ways to embed the partnership more closely to the two brands? And so, yes, you can have the naming rights sponsorship, you can have the media asset. You know, what we did most recently with our extension with Highmark Stadium with the Bills, we actually, a component of our contract is from our foundation to their foundation to do community activation in areas that are important to them. You know, they got state funding, and most properties and teams do whenever they endeavor in new facilities. They have requirements in their collective bargaining agreement with the state of things they have to do to give back to SDOH and diversity and other support in the community. That's critical for us. That's core to our brand as a healthcare company in that market area. So we're jointly funding signature community initiatives together. That's beyond a name on a building. That's really embedding ourselves together. So really think about clarity on what you're trying to achieve, treat it like a partnership, and activate it. Those are the most important pieces.
Awesome. Well, that's all good stuff. My piece of advice would be if you need a partner to help you measure it and put it in their objectives, I know the group to do it. Come talk to us. We do have a couple more minutes to do a couple Q&A. So does anybody have any questions or anything?
We've got a mic coming.
Hey, great panel. Thank you so much. A question for Craig. You're in a very interesting position with a new stadium that's about to be built. Do you have any leverage on how the brand can be identified, or how consumers can receive certain branding for on-site activations?
Absolutely. It's a great question. So for reference purposes, we actually, according to our partners at the Bills, we've set the record for the earliest announcement of a naming rights deal for a stadium in the history of the NFL. So that does give us a much longer runway. The renderings haven't all been finished yet. We're meeting with Populous, the design firm for the stadium, to figure out how our brand gets best integrated into that total experience. And what the Bills are striving to do is not just an NFL, 8 to 10 weeks out of the year weekend environment. They're trying to create a community destination for all of Buffalo. Lots of entertainment, lots of engagements throughout the year. And so that gives us an opportunity for our brand to be present in all of those venues. And so it was important to us as the incumbent, whenever that negotiation period opened, we wanted to move quickly because we wanted to influence that brand experience and how our brand is brought to life. So it's been very advantageous for us. We're sitting around the table now, not just where our suite's going to be located or how big our sign's going to be, but literally we're talking about wellness facilities inside the stadium that can support the Buffalo region, and community events and activation spaces that can be owned by Highmark inside the stadium. So I would say that for any sponsor, whether it's early on in the construction process, which we have the fortune of doing, or even in an existing facility where you're attaching your brand to it, think about that as holistically as possible. How else can you activate beyond just signage? Yeah.
Any other questions?
I'm curious to get your perspective on a couple of you on stage around how you think about the value of partnerships as linear TV bundle dwindles and RSNs obviously are in a lot of trouble. Like how you think about both the CMOs and the rights holders on stage, how you think about the value of the partnership deals in that, and how you think about integrating across a much more diverse media landscape in terms of who's watching it on TV.
I can take a stab at that. So For us, certainly, of course, media and is a big piece of it. However, part of it as well is the local and community activation that we get as part of the deal. And so the Spurs have been amazing in helping us really shape what that looks like, not just for the initial year, but through the duration and how would that evolve and change. And so it's certainly more than just the media. And, we also, there's different ways that we can tap into their team and the capabilities that they have to do storytelling, content creation, things like that, that are really, really valuable for us and a force multiplier for our small but mighty marketing team. So, there's things like that are super advantageous for us.
And if I could just add on top of that, yes, you have much more diversification, splintering of consumable assets than you might have had in the past, but there's demand. So these sports properties have highly passionate fans who will consume that content, and they'll find where it is. And so in partnership with the brands, it's really important to just understand what the channels are, where they're migrating. In Pittsburgh, we're going through that right now. The regional sports network, AT&T Sportsnet, is no longer. The Penguins are now doing it as part of Fenway Sports Group, but you just move with that. You have to understand that the media landscape is changing, but the content and the desire for that content doesn't go away. So just how you partner with your sports team to move with the consumers and where they're moving. And I'm sure that's the same with the football.
MLS has taken away broadcast pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure the Spurs do the same thing. The teams are getting really creative with other ways to get their brand and their content out there. And so they're going to partner. They're going to provide those opportunities if you stay in touch.
Yeah, just to add to that point, really what we are offering is depth and quality of interaction with customers, again, B2B or B2C. And that's something that you can't get as easily through just linear broadcast, even just a one-off social digital campaign. It's connection that transcends generations. And that is the difference in why we believe our properties will always have that value regardless of where the product on the field or on the court is consumed.
As much as the RSN situation is going to be painful in the short term for properties, I'm personally really excited about it. Before I was at the Spurs, I was at Twitch, overseeing gaming and esports sponsorship strategy. And people just don't consume content the way that the media rights deals are set up. The 150-mile radius needs to go away. I'm so excited to start creating a world where the media deals are matching how people really do consume content. And to Craig's point about consumption, I mean, the NBA's social media stats are up by 80%. Gen Z wants this product. It's just a matter of finding where it is. We launched a second screen experience last season. We didn't promote it. We didn't market it. We piloted it. People spend an hour on that thing while they're watching games. Imagine if we actually told people about it. So there's a want for people to be there, and again, it's going to be very painful to start, but it needs to happen for the sport to survive another 50 years.
Awesome. Well, that's the time we have. I want to thank our guests. This was awesome, very insightful, and thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you.